Hopefully you took the Epworth sleepiness scale and you summed your score. I want you to take that total and ask yourself, did you score about a 9, 10, or higher? Yes? If you did, once you hit this level of about a 9 or 10, you were officially operating, performing as if you're drunk. When you hit that, like right between a 9 and a 10, that corresponds to your blood alcohol as if it were 0.08, which in the United States is over the legal limit. You would be pulled over. You would most likely be arrested in most states. So the takeaway here is that so many of us score in this zone, and yet there's no penalty for it. And most of us don't even know how dangerous it is. But as we already discussed, being sleep deprived is just as dangerous to all types of performance as alcohol intoxication. Now, if your score is even higher, if you're scoring a 10, 12, 14, 16 above, that means your performance is even more impaired. So if that's you, if your score is high on the Epworth, then when I get to the tips and takeaways, it just means that that information, and in fact, all of the information that we've been talking about as far as sleep goes, is just that much more important to you. It means it's a signal that something is wrong, that something is making you incredibly sleep deprived. And in fact, if you know that that's not just a snapshot of how you're feeling now, but it actually represents the last month, 2 months, 6 months, year, maybe longer, then you're accumulating a sleep debt that's incredibly dangerous for your brain and your body, not to mention the people around you. So it's time to take it seriously. Now, I want to say 2 things about this. If you scored low, meaning you didn't hit that kind of critical threshold right around a 9 or a 10, and you still feel sleep deprived. So if you're waking up and you don't feel refreshed, if you find yourself really listing throughout the day, if you don't feel that you're as well slept and feeling as peppy as maybe you once did, you should still pay attention to that. For every questionnaire or assessment you'll take during this course, always know that it's just a snapshot, it's just a rough estimate, and it's not even necessarily the best way for us to get information. So if you are scoring that high, there's definitely something wrong that you need to address, and I'm going to try to help you figure out what that is. But if you're scoring on the low side and you still feel tired, you still need to address that. The other thing I want to make sure I emphasize here is if you are struggling and suffering from insomnia, then this questionnaire is not likely the best way to assess you. And the reason for that is because if you have insomnia, you're more likely to also have very high levels of anxiety. Now, anxiety is often accompanied by high levels of physiological arousal. So you can be extremely tired, but still wired. So just because you're not likely to fall asleep in any of these inappropriate locations, it doesn't mean that you're not sleep deprived. Again, this is just a questionnaire. So if you're highly anxious and or you're struggling with insomnia, this questionnaire is probably not the best representation of how sleep deprived you are. So what did you score? I want you to think about it. Why do you think you scored the way you did? And if you sense that there's a problem there, what can you do about it?